Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. It is so good to see everyone here. I like to get to know my people before I start talking to you. So, how many of you, this is your first tech conference ever? Raise your hand. Okay. Oh, look at that. Lots of people with their hands raised. Thank you. I have good news because this is an amazing conference. I have some bad news. Going to an NDC event for your first conference is like your first date being with Beyonce. Like, it's a really high bar, right? But there's good news. There are NDC events all over the world. So I would say go to a few more before you try going to other conferences. All right, let's do another poll. How many of you, this is your second NDC event? Hand up. Okay, hands up. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Okay, these are the folks who know where the bathrooms are, where the snacks are, so I hope you noted where their hands are. So I have been in software development for a very long time. I started in 1997, so to age myself, a long time ago. I worked for Accenture and for Deloitte. I was building enterprise systems like Oracle and SAP, and I still, even all this time later, think that building software is cool. I think that it is amazing that we can take ones and zeros and create value for customers. And you know what? This idea that software is cool actually has caught up with the media, right? Some of the biggest companies in the world are tech companies. And so we always have like the mythology stories of a couple people in a garage who are building what are now multi-billion-dollar companies. But there is a side of building software that people don't really talk about. And that is building software can be exhausting. And for a lot of people who don't build software for a living, this can be surprising. Because when you think about it, our industry doesn't really require physical labor, right? When you think about this building and building this construct, you see brick and steel and iron, all these things. So you can see and imagine people sweating as they work to build the building that we're standing in right now. But the truth is that our industry does exert a toll on the people who work in it, right? That's software developers, that's testers, that's managers. We have so many constraints and burdens that we have to bear, right? There's the never-ending change in our industry. And while that change can be exciting, it can be also exhausting. When I started my career, there are technologies that I use every day that don't even exist anymore. And there's so many new cool tools like, Docker. Like back when I was coming up, I would walk downstairs to the data center, right? I knew the people who ran the data center by name. Do you know the names of the people who run your cloud service? Probably not, right? So the industry has changed in so many ways, and it can be very difficult to keep up with that rate of change. And then there is the burden of always be shipping. Have you heard that term before, always be shipping? Now, as an engineering manager, I've used that term in my career to motivate engineers to keep shipping software, right? Because the idea is that if we are able as a team to continuously deliver value to our customers, then we're able to show the value that we bring to the company. But the fact is that any system that is always on will fail. And I've seen that in my career. I am before you as someone talking about burnout because I've experienced burnout. I've been there. I know how it feels. And the fact is that in our industry, when people burn out, they often burn down things with them, right? You see people burning out of the architectures that we're using. And I've had engineers, we're using React, and then suddenly they're installing Angular. And we're not using this framework, right? But they're trying to cope with burnout. And also people begin to burn down the methods and the practices that we're using. And so they begin to do other things than the processes that we're trying to use for building our software. And I'm here today to say that it doesn't have to be this way. There are better ways to manage teams. There are better ways to work in our industry to build up what I call burnout resistance. And that is the ability to withstand the stress in our industry and to be able to not fall into burnout. Now, just to give a bit of an overview over what we're going to talk about, I'm going to start with what is the problem, right? Let's define the problem. I've worked with a lot of product managers, and one of the things that they always say is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So we're gonna define the problem. Then we're gonna talk about common solutions to that problem, right? Burnout is, as you'll see, very widespread, and we're gonna talk about ways that people try to treat and to mitigate their burnout. And then we're gonna talk about what I call the burnout resistance framework. And it's a very common sense, lightweight way to go about your day, and I hope to share things that you can begin to implement like right now, like today. What can you do to help build up your burnout resistance? And then just to kind of put a bow on it, and this is the Keynote version, so this is one that I don't usually get to share. I'm gonna talk about what do you do when your resources are scarce, when you don't have a lot to pull on and you're battling burnout. So I also want to say that I usually give this talk with my wife, and she could not make the trip this go around, so I'm flying solo. Now, she has the PhD, and I'm just an engineer who uses like Wikipedia. So I often rely on her to kind of go into some of the research behind burnout. And so I'm going to give both my part and her part, but if my wife sees this, I wish you were here. I love you. We'll do it next time together. All right, so let's go into what is burnout. Well, if you look at the definition of burnout, you'll find this. So World Psychiatry defined burnout, and I'm going to put a little bit of text on screen, but it's a syndrome that has 3 key dimensions, right? And that's overwhelming exhaustion, that's cynicism and detachment, and a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you have probably felt all 3 of these things. So this is the definition of burnout. But my wife and I like to boil it down to this working definition of burnout. And that's the ongoing feeling that today's resources are not enough to meet tomorrow's demands. Has anyone ever felt that way? That like the way that you feel right now, it's like, you can't even see having time to do what you need to do today, let alone tomorrow. And so that ongoing feeling is what I like to describe as burnout. Now, there are 3 dimensions of burnout. So there's the exhaustion, right? And so this can be physical, but often it's emotional. You feel that there's like nothing left to give. Maybe after a long day at work, whether you're working in an office or working at home, you just feel like, there's nothing left to give. You can't even like stream Netflix because there's so many things that you've been tasked to do that you don't even have any energy for anything or anyone else. So maybe your partner needs time from you, or your children need time for you, but you just don't have anything left to give. All right, the second dimension is depersonalization. And that is when humans stop being people and become objects. And the way that I like to describe this is, you ever go to, let's say, a hospital because a friend maybe was in an accident, and then you ask where your friend is when you get there, and then the person says, the broken arm, they're in room 3, right? Your friend has ceased to become a person to that worker. That's when you depersonalize someone. And we all work with people, and it's easy to forget that they're humans, that they're people that are engaged in the work that you're doing. And we can forget that these are people that we're working with. And it's easy between engineering and product or design, our managers and ICs, to feel that people are on the other side. But when you're burned out, it gets even worse, right? You begin to forget that we're just all people doing our best, trying to make our jobs work. And then the third element is you don't feel accomplishment, right? The things that used to satisfy you early in your career, or maybe even last week, you don't feel any satisfaction in that anymore, right? So these are the 3 dimensions of burnout. So when we think about burnout, and you may think about, well, how widespread is burnout? Well, it's pretty widespread, right? Gallup did a survey, and this was pre-pandemic, by the way, and they said that of a survey of 7,500 employees, that 23% reported feeling burned out at work, right? Almost a quarter. And then 44% said that they felt burned out sometimes. So we see that burnout is very, very widespread. Now, you may also be saying, okay, but these 2/3 of full-time workers experiencing burnout, what do we understand about engagement? Now, a lot of people think that the opposite of burnout is engagement. So what's engagement, right? Engagement is when you have the people in your team who are always in Slack, and they're always on Zoom calls, and they're smiling, and whenever there's an office activity, they're the first people to arrive, the last people to leave, and you're like, these are the people who are they're all the way in, they're dialed in. And you believe that these people aren't thinking about quitting, right? Because they're always dialed into what's happening. And you may also say that our office is amazing, right? We have pool tables, we have a beer keg in the break room, we have snacks, we bring in meals for everybody. And you may think that everyone is really dialed into what we're doing. But Cambridge did a survey, and they found that for the engaged people, the people who were the most engaged were the ones who were thinking about leaving their jobs, right? So the people who are the most active, the people who are the most visible, the people who you think will be the last people to leave are often updating their resumes and looking for work. And the highly exhausted, engaged group are the people who, again, are the most prone to burning out. And I know in my career, whenever I've been at the end of my rope, I began to think, okay, well, let me just do one last push to try to make this work. And I know that I've probably signaled that I'm engaged when I'm actually burned out, right? And so it's important to not confuse to not confuse engagement with burnout. All right, now there are several costs to burnout. And there are individual costs that we all have to pay. And so Mayo Clinic classified a few of the symptoms of burnout. So you may be wondering, okay, am I burned out? Well, maybe you have these symptoms. There's physical illness, right? Like fatigue and high blood pressure. There are distress, right? Emotions ranging from sadness to being irritated to even feeling rage. And there's also maybe increased sick days, right? So you may have seen people at your company begin to take more time off, saying that they're not feeling well. And then maybe it's one sick day a quarter, then it's one sick day a month, then one sick day a week, right? Those are signs that that person may actually be burned out. So those are the individual costs of burnout. But there are also corporate costs as well. Harvard Business School did a survey, and they found that if you added up the cost of burnout, it ranges from $125 to $190 billion. Can you imagine, right, how much lost productivity that is? And not only that, but the highest factor in these costs were demands at work, and that resulted in $48 billion in spending. So when we look at burnout, we see that there's enormous individual costs, but there's also enormous corporate costs as well. Now, given that burnout is so widespread, it's not surprising that people often try to find ways to combat burnout. And there are two major categories that people try to cope with burnout. There are corporate methods and individual methods. And I'm going to go through a few of those methods and really explain why they may not be very effective. All right, so first, a lot of corporations try to create these swanky office spaces, right? So I work at GitHub. I've been to a few of the offices, and they are nice, right? They're really well laid out. Some companies even bring in people to do yoga in the yard, and they'll have all these benefits that are meant to help people feel better about coming to work. And often these companies, they spend a ton of money to make developers feel like royalty. But sometimes royalty winds up at the red wedding. And then no matter what you do, no matter how nice the coffee machine or the espresso machine is in the office, people who get to that state, none of that matters. And so the reason that corporations, even though they are well-meaning, aren't really great at fighting burnout is because when times get hard, when a recession hits, those are often the first things that get cut from the budget, right? That sabbatical that you've been banking on for several years may go away. And so often corporations are not effective at helping the people who work there combat burnout. So I don't really think that corporations are the place to go for an answer. But then there are individual ways to try to combat burnout. There's escapism, right? So this picture is someone who's running along the beach, trying to get away from it all. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite ways to exercise self-care is going on a vacation, going on a trip, especially with the world being opened up again. And I think that the problem with that is that it becomes almost a performance, right? How many of you have gone on a trip and you're always taking pictures, right? Doing it for the gram or doing it for the TikTok and trying to document what you're doing. Like, we're working hard to show how much we're not working. And that can also exert a toll on people who are dealing with burnout. We even have people falling off the Grand Canyon and falling off high cliffs, right? Trying to get that perfect picture. And we also often go to excess. We begin to abuse food and alcohol, maybe even drugs, to try to deal with our burnout. And so we find that corporate efforts often fall short, and even our own individual efforts don't solve the problem. And so my wife and I looked at a ton of research, and we tried to come up with the framework for building burnout resistance. And we wanted something that was really common sense. We wanted something that people could get. We didn't want it to be something that you needed to have a PhD to figure out, even though my wife has one of those. But we wanted it to be something that people could understand, and we wanted it to be something that you did not need a lot of privilege to bring into bear. And so this framework has 3 parts, and I'm gonna go through each part of the framework in this talk, and I'm going to give you an example of how it works, and then I'm gonna also, for each part, do what I call the one thing you simply must do to hopefully drive home each part. All right? So let's dive in. Now, this is called Managing the Burnout Burndown because I am an engineering manager and I've been a Scrum Master. And so a lot of you have heard of a Burndown chart. Have you ever heard about that? A Burndown chart? Yeah. Yeah, I know some of you probably sick of them. I've gotten sick of them over the years, but I've always come back to them as a very useful way to understand work, right? Where the team is. So for those of you who don't know, those of you who may be early in your careers, a Burndown chart is really very simple. You have an x-axis, which is time, right? This is usually measured in days. Then you have a y-axis, which represents work. And that work can be several forms. A lot of you are familiar with story points and measuring work with that, but it could be, there are a couple ways that you can measure work. And the idea is that you have this ideal line, right? This ideal line is simply if the work burned down a certain amount every day, then it would get down to 0, right? So that's the ideal line. And then you have, as you go throughout the period, and we usually use sprints, you track how is the work burning down? How much work is being done? And so this becomes the amount of work that is becoming less. And so the idea behind a Burndown chart is that you want the work to go down to 0. And the real utility of a Burndown chart is that you have a graphical representation of where the work is, right? Are we on schedule? Are we behind schedule? So it's a very easy way to help track the work. And so as a Scrum Master and as an Eng manager, I've often spent many late nights looking at Burndown charts and trying to see, okay, where is the work and how is my team in relation to the work? But over time, as I began to work with burnout teams, I realized that I needed to do more than just burn down work. There were certain things going on in the lives of the people that I was working with that I also needed to help them burn down. And so this talk talks about the ways that you can burn down the things that often lead to stress. All right, the first part of the framework is burning down barriers. Burning down barriers. Now, we work in teams because teams can accomplish more than we can as individuals. And it's really important that as we work together, and during the pandemic, it was really hard because most of us often were confined to home or we weren't able to move around. But I think that as the pandemic has eased, we've all gotten back to working together. And whether you work in an office or you work fully remote, or some hybrid situation, the people that you work with, it's really easy to build up barriers, right? Because we all have deadlines, we all have pressure. And there's an old saying that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I love that saying because it means that if we take the time to connect with each other, then we'll get so much more done. And I really encourage you to, as you think about the people that you're working with, there may be some stresses, right? I've worked with a lot of people in my career, and I'm going to tell you, I have not always gotten along with everyone that I've worked with. But I've had to figure out how to make it work because the task at hand demands that we work together. And so it's really important that we find ways to optimize the relationships between us and the people that we work with. And I think that there are lots of ways that companies can help people do this. The way that you arrange working places and how you structure teams is one way. Having effective culture is also a great way to do that, making sure that you have cultural constructs that support people working together. At GitHub, one of the things that we do is we have in-person mini summits. And so we fly people in different teams to the same location to just spend time together. Because even though we have all these cool tools, like we have Zoom, we have Slack, and all these tools, there's really nothing like getting together in person. And what we find is that as we make the relationships of the people that we work with richer, as we take time to acknowledge their humanity, as we make space for mutual respect, we get better outcomes. We get better working relationships as we get to know each other better. And so I really encourage you to think about right now some of the people that at work that you're not getting along with, right? Maybe there's disagreements about a technology choice, or maybe people feel that the engineering team is getting ahead of product and design, right? I've been there. And what I encourage you to do is try to reach out to that person, whoever that person may be, and try to find common ground. Trying to find something that you agree on. And then from there, try to figure out, well, what needs to be true for you to move forward? And one of the things that I help my engineers do when they come to me with this challenge is try to figure out, okay, what would need to be true for that person again, for them to come around to your perspective? But before you do that, just listen, right? Don't listen to win the argument. Don't listen to try to, wait for that person to stop talking so that you can make your point, but seek to understand. Seek to understand. And I think that often we forget that conversations are meant for people to understand each other. And I think that often it's important to kind of make that first step. And so for this part of the framework, the one thing that you simply must do is just meet in person on a regular basis. And I know it sounds simple, but it's really effective. It's really easy for us to work in silos, especially if you're working from home, to just not even talk to people for several days at a time. But I encourage you to just meet with people who you work with. At my previous company and even at GitHub, we have a Slack robot called, I think it's called Donut. My previous company is called Donut. I think it's called something else at GitHub. But the idea is that it's just a little application. I think it's called Bagel. That will just pair you up, right? And it'll just randomly pair you up with someone, and then you can hop on a Zoom and just talk. And so I've met so many people who aren't even engineers by this Bagel bot that just pairs me up, and it's just very simple. We get together, we get to know each other, and I have already found it super useful because that person that I had a chat with like a month ago, I now need something from that person, right? And so like these little Slack bots, whatever tool that you use, or you can replicate it in various ways, is super important. And as an eng manager, I really never liked that the first time I asked someone for something, the first time that I talk to someone, it's like, I need something from that person, right? And so by having those conversations, by making time to get to know people as people, then when you really need something, you've already laid the groundwork. There's an old proverb I like to quote that says, dig your well before you're thirsty, right? Dig that emotional well, build that respect well before you need it. and that makes it so much easier to work with people afterwards. All right, so the first part is burning down barriers, the things that separate us. The second part is burning down distractions. Now, we live in a culture where there's always something to take our attention away from the task at hand. And like this is really different from the past, right? When people worked in factories, right, you really couldn't bring a Model T home to work on. But now we can work anywhere. So, I mean, many of you could pull out your phones right now and log into GitHub or whatever you use for source control and actually start doing work. You can review PRs standing right here, right now. You can do that at home. You can do that when you're in the shower, right? You can do that almost anywhere. And so the almost ever-present nature of work means that we can also be overpowered by that work. But there's not just work, right? Our phones have many distractions. There's social media sites, there's streaming services. There are all these things that are combating for your attention. But the fact is that your attention is very limited. And most of us don't think about this, but our brains are wired to only be able to focus on a few things for a certain period of time. And when you exhaust the attention of your brain, then you lose the ability to process new information. And so the takeaway from this, and the reason that this helps with burnout, is that if you use the power of no, you'll find that you'll get more things done, but you also open the doors to saying yes to something else later. And I know that often it's really hard to say no. If you're here at NDC, right, you're working in development, and people who build code are often hyper-motivated people. And hyper-motivated people like to say yes to a lot of things. Coding requires a lot of hope, right? Because we're writing code that is interpreted by a compiler or at runtime that you hope works, right? And so we lean into hard things. But I encourage you to understand that no is also very, very powerful. And what I would hope that everyone can do, either now or later tonight, is think about what are your values, right? What are the things that you're placed on the planet to do? Everyone here has a set of things that you're built for. And what you can do is when you think about, okay, what are my values? What are the things that really light the fire of my heart, that give me passion and energy, and then just align your work with those values. And you have to be able to say that even though this thing that I'm being asked to do is cool or interesting, or I want to do it to make somebody happy, you have to learn to say no. You have to learn to say, I'm going to pass on this because there's other things that I need to spend my limited attention on. And I know it's hard, and I've had to develop my no muscles in time. And there are really easy ways to do that. You can say, hey, I would love to help out with that, but here's what I'm working on now. Can you help me understand why the thing that you're asking me to do is more valuable than that plate of work, right? Now that requires that you always know what you're working on, that you're tracking your work, and so it's really important that you do that. But by doing that, then you give that person a view of like what your values are. And then when you're saying no, then they know that you're not saying no to them as a person, you're saying no to the distraction of what really is valuable to you. There's other techniques of saying no that I can talk about after, but no is so powerful. And I think it's something that we don't utilize very often because we often want people to like us. And we think that saying yes means people will like us. But if you get burned out, then you won't be able to deliver on that thing that you said yes to. But it requires going through your values and aligning your work with the values. So what is the one thing that you simply must do to burn down distractions? Well, one of the things that I like to do is a social media fast. And I know that some of you grew up on, Twitter, and now there's all these other things that my children use that I don't even know about, like Snapchat or other tools. But I find that whenever I just uninstall those apps from my phone for a period of time, and you can do this, I can tell you can do this, but that frees up so much of my mental weight, right? So that frees up so much mental space for me to resist the urge to again scroll through TikTok, scroll through Instagram, and so I'm able to free up that time for again the things that align with my values. Now, I'm not saying to do it forever. I will say try it for a week, see how you feel. If you like it, keep going, right? And again, these tools do have value, but I think that they exert an outsized drain on our attention. And by doing that, then they lower our ability to resist burnout because we're stressed out by all the things that we're being distracted by. All right, so the last part of this framework, actually, I have bonus content because I'm doing the keynote and I'm at NDC. So when we talk about focus, yes, it's really important that you very much constrain your focus to the things that really align with your values. But I like to practice mindfulness. And so one of the ways that I like to do that is in something that we all do every day, and that's eating. And I'm just going to ask people to do something the next time you eat. And the good news is that there's great food at this conference, and NDC always rocks the food. But so many of us, and I know I've been there, because we're often rushing to do things, or we're trying to maybe like watch a video while we eat. I have eaten food that I don't even remember what I ate. I don't remember what it tasted like. And I just eat and then rush through and then move on. And so I totally miss out on the joys of eating. And studies have shown that we have to chew our food more often. Now, they say that you should chew your food 32 times, right? That's a lot of chewing, and so I totally get that. But the idea is that you chew your food, that's every mouthful of food, 32 times. I know this seems kind of silly. Then you actually break it down more. You extract more nutrients from the food. You make it easier to digest. And so that process of just chewing the food actually is powerful. So maybe not 32, I would say 10 times. So when you eat lunch, try chewing your food 10 times before you swallow it. And what you'll find is that, one, you're actually tasting the food that has been beautifully prepared by the vendors here for the people who are catering, and you'll feel better. And then you'll actually be able to think about the food that you're eating. And that's just one way to focus on the task at hand, right? So many things in this world we do, and our minds are elsewhere. We're totally not even connected to what's going on right now. And this simple practice is a way for you to just connect with the thing that you have to do to avoid dying, and that's eating. So you can do that today. You can do that in 3 hours. Just chew everything 10 times. You can at me on Twitter if you think that this kind of poppycock, but I'm telling you, it makes a difference, all right? All right, so the last part of this framework is burning down illness. Now, we all walk around in these meat sacks, right, that we're constrained to, and so we have to travel around in bodies. And the challenge is that often we don't treat our bodies very well. We may not get enough water. We may not get enough sleep. And when you do that to yourself, then you limit your ability to resist stress, right? Because when you're well rested, when you're properly hydrated, when you do things to exercise your body, then you actually become more resistant to stress because your body has the reserves that it needs to deal with stress. And so the key to this is to find time to take care of your body. And I know it's difficult. I flew from Texas on Sunday night, and I landed on Monday, and I've probably gotten maybe an average of 3 hours of sleep a night since I've been here, right? So I'm working through my failure to not really do good kind of body work. But it's critically important that we take care of ourselves, that we take the time to mind our bodies, that we take the time to think about, what are we doing to enhance our health? I know that with my teams, I obviously can't force them to do anything, but I always try to make sure that if I see them working late, they answer that late night Slack, or they send that late night email, let them know, hey, it can wait until tomorrow, right? As your manager, I'm saying that you don't need to spend late nights doing that. That's time that you should better spend with your loved ones and getting a better night's sleep, right? And so what's the one thing that you simply must do? Well, that is, and I think that the area that there's the best control over, that you can get the most value of is sleeping. And my wife and I have done a lot of things to upgrade our sleep quality. We've invested in a weighted blanket, which has worked wonders. We've lowered the temperature in our bedroom by several degrees. and we sleep better. We use a white noise audio file in Google Music while we sleep. And so all those things have resulted in better sleep. And I find that whenever I do those things, whenever I get a good night's sleep, like I'm a better engineer when I'm better rested. I'm a better manager when I'm well rested. And I'm less irritable and I can focus more and things are more clear. And so the simple thing of just working on your sleep can do wonders. So those are the 3 parts of the framework. And so I want to go back to the Burndown chart because you have the idea of the ideal line. And I really like the ideal line. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the ideal line is just that line that, like I said before, that if you perfectly burn down the work, then it'll burn down evenly every day. And so the team will get down to 0. And the way that the ideal line works is that, if you're above the line, then you are running behind schedule. But if you're below the line, then you're in front of the schedule. And I used to, again, obsess about the ideal line because I would look and see where's the team every day based on are they above or under the line. But in time, as I work with my teams, I began to not stress out so much about this ideal line. And it's really about tolerance. It's really about the practices that my teams are going through. The Burndown chart is a useful metaphor, right? But it is simply the beginning of the story. It's not the end of the story. It's simply a snapshot in time of where the team is. And it's so much better that we use that tool for what it's good for, which is that snapshot, but it's really meant to ask conversations. And those conversations should be around how we're doing with our practices, how we're doing with our daily stand-up, how we're doing with our engineering practices, how we're doing with the way that we do PRs, our code reviews, how we're doing with the ways that we communicate, right? Those practices are so much more important than the Burndown chart. And I say that because you can get burned out trying to avoid burnout. And I don't want people to obsess over the things that I shared with you. And so you're gonna never perfectly manage your life as an engineer, right? Every day is gonna have error. It may be error in the code that you're writing. It may be error in the communications between the engineering team and the product team and design. And it may be errors in how the leadership of the company is dictating how things go. And so that's just gonna happen. And the same thing happens with how we manage our stress, how we deal with the things that happen to us. And so it's less important to do all of these things perfectly, but it's really important that we understand what is our tolerance, right? Like right now, if I'm not getting the proper sleep, I know that I can go for a couple days, but I know that when I get home, I'm gonna sleep like a solid, 8 hours a night. There may be times in your life where your relationships aren't where they are. Maybe those are your relationships at work, when you may be not getting along with a lot of people, or in your personal life. Like, that's okay if that happens for a certain amount of time. But it's really important that you take the time to tend to those relationships. And there may be times where you are distracted, right? Your manager or someone else may put a lot of things on your plate, right? You might have some kind of deadline. GitHub has Universe coming up, which is our big annual conference coming up in November. It's the first time coming back to being in person. I'm super excited about that. And so my team has deadlines that are tied to GitHub Universe that we're working toward. And so that is adding a lot of pressure. And I feel that I need to do a lot of work with my team to make sure that they're not feeling overwhelmed by this deadline. And so this framework is meant to be a guideline, but it's also meant to show that it is a way for us to interrogate the reality of our lives and see where we are. And the best way to do that is to just have a check-in with yourself, right? I do a personal retrospective every week. At the end of the week, I look over what happened to me during that week, and I try to figure out, how did I do with my health? How did I do with my relationships? How did I do with my ability to focus? Was my calendar managed, or was it overwhelmed with meetings and work? Is my task list getting shorter, or is it just getting longer and longer every day? And so that weekly check-in is my way of using this framework to make corrections. Because I can make corrections in my relationships. I can go to that person that I'm having maybe a disagreement with and say, you know what, let's just kind of go for a walk if we're in the same place, or let's hop on a Zoom chat and just chat about what's going on. I can fix things that are going on with my health, right? I can double down on eating better. I can double down on chewing my food before I swallow it. I can double down on getting better sleep, right? So these things can be corrected. And I don't want people to get stressed out because you may be thinking, you know what? My relationships are kind of trash right now. I've pissed off a lot of people. Or I haven't slept much in the past 3 days, and all I eat is junk food. Or, every day there's more to do than the day before. There are ways for you to work on it, but it starts like right now, right? It starts with taking time to get better practices. So don't worry about perfection, work on your practices. All right, but what about scarce resources? So I shared a lot with you. I hope that everyone got something that you can say, okay, I can do that. I can work on getting better sleep. I can work on working out maybe more consistently, or I can work on saying no, right? Those are all simple things that everyone in here can do. But hey, we all have scarce resources. Like we work in technology, which is an industry that typically pays very well. So you may feel like, well, my resources aren't scarce. But money's not the only resource, right? Time is a resource. Energy is a resource. And so what I want to do is share a couple things that you can do when you're short on time, short on energy, short on other resources to make this framework work, all right? So the first one is about volunteering, right? So I'm an introvert. People are surprised by that because I get on stage and talk in front of large audiences on a regular basis. But no, I am a classic introvert. And so that means that I get drained by being around a lot of people. And I love people. I mean, come up and talk to me afterward. Come up and, if you at me on Twitter, I will more than likely respond, at least eventually. But I get drained by human interaction. So this relationship part of the framework, I have to admit, I struggle with because I'm drained by being around lots of people. I'm drained by noise. And what I found is that the cheat code for this is volunteering. And Microsoft and GitHub we have a great benefit where the hours that we spend on volunteering can result in matching from the company, and your companies may have things like that. And I really think that some of you may have volunteered before the pandemic, but since you were maybe forced to quarantine, you fell out of doing that. I highly recommend that you pick that back up because it is a built-in way to build relationships because you're around people who are passionate about something that you're passionate about too, right? Because that's why you're volunteering. And I think that can be a powerful way to just get out of being introverted, get out of being away from people, and to meet other people and contribute to a worthy cause. The way that I do this is by mentoring, right? I'm part of a group that mentors people who are new to technology, who are entering the field. And so that gives me the opportunity to every day talk to people who are passionate about that too. And so I know a lot of you have volunteered, and again, you may be in the situation where, well, I used to volunteer, but the pandemic kind of shut that down. Why not re-engage, right? Why not show up at the next meeting? Why not email the organizer and say, hey, I know I haven't been there in a while, let me get back into that. And by doing that, by being around other people, you'll find that you'll have people who you can talk to, right? So many studies have shown that simply the process of talking about your problems make those problems easier. And what my friends and I do, what we try to do on a regular basis, is get together and say, what is the one thing that is pissing you off right now, right? And we have honest conversations about that. And often the benefit of that exercise, it isn't that they solve my problems. It's not that pissed off thing that is bothering me goes away, but it's talking with people who understand what I do. They understand me. And simply by doing that, that thing that is pissing me off becomes less stressful because I've shared it with other people. I've said the thing out loud that I've been carrying inside myself, often for weeks. And so that's powerful. And so volunteering is a way for you to find those people that you can talk to and that you can do something that you're passionate about, but get that kind of trusted circle to have honest conversations. All right, and so what about focus, right? So I talked about the power of focus and the power of saying no. You might be like, I'm really overburdened and my job requires me to be always doing 200 things all at once, and I understand that. But if you have scarcity in terms of time to say no, I do recommend journaling as a practice. And I have journals that I've kept electronically over the years. If you name a journaling tool, I've used it. I've used Evernote, I've used OneNote, I've used whatever note is out there to a journal. But I've actually found that like physically writing down my journal is super powerful. And so for a while, I went back to paper journals. So I would have just a journal that I would just get a pen and just write in and just write what I'm thinking about. I would just write out my thoughts. And I even have journal prompts that I would respond to help me kind of make that a more faithful practice. And right now, I've converted to using an app called Notability on the iPad and an Apple Pencil so that I have the ability to have that kind of writing exercise, but it's all electronic, right? It's saved on my iPad. And so the reason that I do that is that I find that the act of like writing out my thoughts makes me feel that I'm getting them out of my head. And I find that the ability to get those thoughts out of my head gives me space to not worry about that. And it also gives me space to kind of put in new things into my mind, right? And one of the best aspects of journaling is that when you look back a week, a month, a quarter, or a few years, you'll find that, wow, those things that were really bothering me when I wrote that, like that became nothing, right? That was such a non-issue. And as you do that, as you journal and you have time to reflect, then you'll be able to see that over time, most of the things that we're worried about happening actually never happen. And then what you'll be able to do is that you realize that I should probably stop worrying about things so much. And so again, it's a very simple thing. Hopefully everyone has access to paper and pen, but that's something that you can start tonight, right? You can begin to journal, get those thoughts out of your head onto a more permanent form. And I think that you'll find that that lets you focus on what's really important. All right, and so you may feel that, hey, this exercise thing sounds great, but I don't have time to go to the gym. Going to the gym is really expensive. I know that every time I start working out, so like I've worked out on and off over my, almost 50 years on the planet. And like, what's the first thing that I do when I start working out? Right? I buy workout clothes, right? I'm not sure if you're you, but I get like the leggings and I get the shirt and I get, I hit up like, Lululemon and I, deck myself out, and then those clothes are used for maybe like 6 months, and then I stop and then I redo it, right? So I always get caught in this trap of like buying workout gear. So I understand working out can be limiting. It can be hard to find time. It can be hard to go, find a gym that works for you, a gym that's close enough by to you. And so I understand that finding time to work out can be challenging. But I think that taking a walk is a really easy, low-cost way to exercise. If you live in a place that I assume is safe to walk around outside, and that some people don't. But my wife and I actually started a practice of every day after dinner, we just go for a walk. We'll just walk a few blocks. That gives us time to catch up with what happened during the day. We break like a light sweat by doing that because we walk at a pretty good pace. And the simple practice of walking has been enormously successful in building up my burnout resistance, right? Because I get a chance to work out my body. It's something that I can do on a regular basis. I can connect with my partner in life. And so I just really encourage everyone to just take a walk. Take a walk. Maybe not every day, but on a regular basis, maybe 3 times a week, make time to take a walk. So those are ways that you can hopefully, with very limited investments of time and resources, manage burnout. And I think that it's critically important that we do this. I think that a lot of us are going to be defined by what happened in 2020, right? This global pandemic that hit the world. And I know that a lot of you are stressed out about it, right? You're stressed out about having to live through that time in life. But I really think that we can take this thing that happened to everyone here and use it as a springboard to doing something better. That we can be the generation that, yes, we were locked down for 2 years, but we came out better for it. We came out more resilient. We came out with a better understanding of what's important in life. And I really hope that you all can see that as an opportunity to become the better version of yourself, right? I know that the pandemic hit my family hard. My kids had to learn from home, and my oldest son is applying for colleges, and he wrote an essay about what happened during the pandemic. And he admitted that he was a sophomore in high school when the pandemic hit, and so he spent basically half a school year learning from home. And he said that he lost motivation, right? It's really hard to go from being in a classroom with a teacher to being at home, learning on Zoom, right? When you're laying in bed, listening to someone teach you algebra, right? It's just not the same thing. And his grades actually did slip through that process. But what he wrote in this essay really motivated me, because he said that it was his family and his friends that really helped him through that time. And his grades dipped, right, during that time, but he was able to bring them back up because he had people around him who helped him do that. And one reason that I'm really passionate about giving this talk is that we're so much better when we do it together. We're so much better when we're not burned out. And I think that we can be the generation that really tackles burnout resistance, and we let the stresses that will inevitably happen in life not get to us, then we can do so much more, right? We've been built for this. We've been through the fire. We've been tested. If you're standing here, you made it. Congratulations. Let's keep going. Let's build ourselves into the better versions of who we are. And I really hope that this framework that I shared with you is a part of that. I hope that I've shared tools that you can use even today, that you can have more practices to help you take control over your relationships, that you can help get rid of the things that are distracting you, that you can also make sure that you revitalize your health, invest in your body, right? You only get one, right? Until we do cloning technology, you got one body, so take care of it. And I really hope that this framework is a way that you all can build up the reserves that you need to deal with stress, right? The world is not gonna get less stressful, right? There will be some other pandemic level event that will hit the world, right? Maybe it's gonna be economic. Hopefully it won't be some viral thing, but it's gonna happen. But if there's one thing that we learned from the pandemic, that we can make it, right? We can go through life-changing experiences and come out better for it. And so I really hope that you all can invest in this framework. And I really believe that healthy teams build healthy code. And this framework can be a powerful way for you to invest in your own health, but also be a model for the people around you that you work with every day, right? So many of the habits that I have right now came from people I worked with 20 years ago, who I don't even know where they are right now, but being around them made an impact on me. And I really hope by sharing this framework that you begin to model better behaviors so that the people that you're working with now in 20 years, even though they may not know where you are, they are all the better for it because you help model burnout resistance for them. So I really hope that as you go throughout your careers, that you keep this framework in mind. I use this, it works, it's powerful. I'm a better human because of it. And I think that it can help you connect with your humanity as well. So I will be cheering for you as you do this. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm very easy to find on the internet. I'm happy to talk to all of you. And I will be cheering for you, right, as you help to build the best version of who you can be. All right, thank you. Welcome to NDC. Enjoy the conference.